All right, hi there, welcome everyone. This is SEC215. Really excited to be here at reInvent. Hopefully everyone's having a great time. My name is Himanshu Verma. I lead a team of worldwide security specialists at Amazon that cover all of our native AWS security services. This session is Automate Data Discovery with Amazon Macie, and I'm joined with two other amazing presenters. I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hey everyone, my name is Anuj Gupta. I'm a principal solutions architect with AWS. I specifically work with hyper-growth companies to build cloud-native architectures. And then I'm going to actually talk about a story that we have built this feature along with the feedback from our customers and like yourself. So I'll invite Carlos to introduce himself.
Hi everybody, my name is Carlos, Director at Data Security at Opportune. And that is not a typo on the screen or on your AWS app. That is my name, first and last. I'll be telling you guys my customer story here today.
Thank you. So Anuj and Carlos will be joining as we go through the session. What we'll cover today is, first and foremost, the data protection needs and what are the drivers for data governance, data protection. And now I think customers are also looking for data security posture management, how to correlate some of the security events as it relates to sensitive data. We'll cover some of the key features of Amazon Macie. This is a service that we actually relaunched in 2020, and then since then have been adding and enhancing new feature sets. So I'll cover very quickly some key highlights and feature sets for that. And then talking about new features, we just launched an amazing new feature this week, which is called the Automated Sensitive Data Discovery. So we'll cover that feature in depth with a live demo as well of that feature. And then as Anuj mentioned, we'll have one of our customers come over and talk through a real life scenario of their journey in how they were leveraging Macie and how this new feature helps them with their sensitive data discovery journey. And then we'll leave you guys with some key takeaways. There'll be some time for Q&A as well afterwards. So let's dive into this problem statements and use cases for sensitive data discovery. First and foremost, as customers like yourself and organizations are inventing and are taking their journey into cloud, there's tons and tons of data that is being created every day, which is then creating the complexity and the challenge to identify where all is the customer sensitive data. Or what is considered PII, personal identifiable information, mainly to help customers comply with regulatory compliances and data privacy and security needs. Additionally, as organizations like yourself are operating globally, there are global standards as well as regulatory compliances that need to be adhered to, which is what also keeps the security teams and the data governance teams busy so that to ensure whether it's global regulatory compliances like GDPR or regional compliances like the California Privacy Act, CCPA, et cetera, they need to be met. One of the primary challenges in all of those is to first identify where all is the sensitive data so that you can then take actions and then protect that sensitive data. And then finally, identifying sensitive data as customers are migrating and moving their journey from on-premise to cloud. Whether you're starting a new data lake or you're bringing data from on-premise workloads to the cloud, ability to identify where that sensitive data is also a key challenge. So these are some of the key problem statements that we want to address with Macie. So what is Amazon Macie? As I mentioned, Amazon Macie is a service that we relaunched in 2020. It's actually one of our primary services focused on discovering sensitive data at scale. So Macie leverages machine learning as well as pattern matching to then identify and match what is sensitive and highlight sensitive data types. The service actually has two key features. First and foremost, it's natively integrated with Amazon S3. So it brings up all the inventory of your buckets, the objects in those buckets, and then highlights that inventory to the customers in an interactive dashboard at the organization level. And then secondly, it then dives into providing the data security posture around those buckets and the inventory of the objects in that using what we call built-in managed data identifiers and or custom identifiers, which are leveraged to then match and identify sensitive information. So if we look at how Macie works, it's an AWS account-based service enabled at the account level. Also can be enabled, and as a best practice, we recommend customers to enable this at the AWS organization level. So if data governance team are using delegated management access, they can actually go and enable this at the delegated management level and then easily enable it across all member accounts as well. Once enabled at the account level, Macie will start evaluating and bringing in the inventory of all of your S3 buckets across those accounts in one place. Not only is it bringing that inventory, but it's also monitoring control plane changes to any bucket policies. So for example, if there's changes in encryption policies or access control policies, it'll highlight those in real time. Now, additionally, it's also now going to automatically start discovering sensitive data using a feature called intelligent sampling on a regular basis, on a daily basis, which will then be available to customers in an interactive data map where you can then easily highlight and view where are the high priority and the high sensitive buckets or objects that need to be acted upon or you need to take an actions on. So this is how really Macie works. The findings that Macie reports, both policy findings as well as the sensitive data findings, are available in the console. They're also available in EventBridge and can be easily routed to our native centralized monitoring and cloud posture assessment service like AWS Security Hub, or from EventBridge, you can route them to your third-party centralized monitoring tools as well. Some of the key benefits that the service provides, first and foremost, is now the automatic sensitive data discovery at scale. This is a brand new feature that we just enhanced in the service. Once it's enabled on a brand new account, it'll automatically start bringing in the inventory from S3, as well as also start evaluating sensitive data on a regular basis. Now, Macie allows customers to go in and select target buckets in the form of what we call sensitive data discovery jobs. If customers need to go and actually take an action on buckets and scan for sensitive data where they don't have visibility and actually scan all of the data in that bucket, there is a way that you can configure jobs in Macie. Those jobs actually have a lot of configuration and flexibility available. Customers can choose how often do they want to scan that data by using recurrence patterns, or defining whether they want that job to be a scheduled job, either daily, weekly, monthly. Also, customers can define object criteria, which is how much in that bucket do they want to scan. Now, these are cases where customers already know that they need to go and scan for sensitive data. What we often heard from customers was that most of the time, as organizations are growing and either the AWS accounts are growing or the number of buckets are moving into hundreds or thousands, as well as the data is increasing in the scale of petabytes, it's not always feasible to go in and start scanning for all of the data or petabytes of data. That is why we introduced the automatic sensitive data discovery at scale that is now available in the service. Additionally, being a managed service, Macie provides customers the wide scale of both managed data identifiers, which cover the breadth of financial data types, such as credit card numbers, bank account numbers, healthcare data types, which includes insurance IDs, et cetera, personal identifiable information like first name, last name, national IDs like passport numbers. These are all already built into the service. So customers only have to take an action to either include or exclude these. Also, they provide the regional and the global expansion that customers need across multiple regions. Additionally, the service also provides the ability to define custom data identifiers that customers can define based upon what your organization considers is sensitive to your business. So for example, if your applications are collecting data of a data type in the form of, let's say, a subscriber ID, and that's where you're collecting the social security number, then you can actually go in and create a PCRE regular expression in the form of a custom data identifier that can also be included to then identify that matching data in Macie. And then finally, as I mentioned, all the findings are available for customers to easily automate and take actions, whether it's building your own custom dashboards around those findings and or routing event-based actions to either take response and remediation or do data protection activities on that data. That is all easily available. Most of the management operations are available through an API, so customers can actually automate that, whether it's in your data lakes and or streaming data pipelines. You can easily orchestrate the service to discover sensitive data and then take actions on those findings. Without further ado, I will now invite Anuj to go over our new feature, which is the automated sensitive data discovery.
Thanks, Himanshu. Before we actually talk about this feature, how many of you have actually used Amazon Macie? Okay. And how many of you have been in a situation where you actually unexpectedly found some sensitive data in a S3 bucket? I see a lot of hands. So before this feature, you have to create Macie scan jobs to discover sensitive data for specific buckets. And that requires some guesswork on customers' part to identify, okay, which buckets they want to prioritize to do Macie scans and discover sensitive data. But what about you have thousands of buckets, or you have tens or hundreds of AWS accounts? With the launch of this feature, you will be able to discover sensitive data more broadly and continuously across all your AWS accounts, across all the S3 buckets, by just enabling this feature. It provides you that broad visibility that you need across all the accounts. It supports continuous scans to discover sensitive data in your AWS accounts in a cost-effective manner. What it does is it is using intelligent sampling techniques to identify what data to discover. And by doing that, it is reducing the amount of data scanning needed, which reduces the cost of data discovery by more than 99%. It also helps you prioritize some of these buckets. Instead of focusing on all of these buckets, you identify which buckets to focus on when it is informing you about the findings on those buckets. So you can prioritize your investigations, you can prioritize your remediation instead of actually looking at some of the false positives. So I talked a lot about this new feature. Let's see that new feature in action. So to start, you need to actually select an AWS Macie designated administrator account. And Macie designated administrator account can access and monitor the overall data security posture of your entire S3 data store. So for the purpose of this demo, I have selected the account already, which you're seeing on my screen right now. Let's see how you can enable this feature. So you go to Automated Discovery Settings page. And then for the purpose of this demo, I already have enabled this feature. Note that this feature is available for a 30-day free trial. And as soon as this feature is enabled in your accounts, it will start doing broad scans across all the S3 data store that you have to help you prioritize the sensitive data investigation and remediate them. So once you have enabled this feature, let's see what the results would look like. So I go to the summary page to look at the results once I've enabled this feature. As you can see on the screen, I have 6 accounts that are actually linked to this Macie designated administrator account. There are a total of 107 buckets within those 6 accounts. But in your case, you may have tens to hundreds of AWS accounts, or you can have hundreds to thousands of S3 buckets. As the organization grows, it can get complicated to discover sensitive data or to know where the sensitive data lies. And a lot of customers, they remain in uncertainty whether their data is protected or not. With this new feature, you have that broad visibility to know about all the buckets in all the different accounts that you have. It also tells me that Macie has found 26 buckets with sensitive data. So it has discovered buckets with objects which have sensitive data. It is also telling me that there are buckets which does not have sensitive data so far. So you get that broad visibility. It provides you that bird's eye view of looking at your overall data security posture. Once you have actually looked at the overall data security posture, now you want to better understand and start your investigation. So let's go to the S3 buckets data page and look at the heat map for our S3 buckets. So as you can see, I have over 100 buckets in different accounts. And there is a heat map that is provided to me, which is showing me buckets in different color. Each of the squares represent an S3 bucket. And it is giving me a very good visual representation of where my prioritization efforts should be focused on without having to run jobs for S3, each specific S3 bucket. It gives you information on the account ID. It gives you information what's the name of that account. It gives you information on how many buckets have been found in that particular account which have sensitive data. So for the first one, as you can see on the screen, is 14 buckets with sensitive data. There are 56 buckets with no sensitive data discovered so far. And there are 3 buckets which are pending scan for sensitive data. Now what that tells me is I can get a high-level view of how many buckets in a particular account have sensitive data. The color on each of these buckets represents something. So let's see that. When you click on a particular account ID to focus your investigation for that particular account, you can drill it down further and see the red color here represents that Macie has found sensitive data on that particular bucket. The darker the red color, it means higher number of sensitive data with different data types. The blue color represents here is that Macie has scanned objects, but it has not really found any sensitive data so far. And the darker the blue color, it represents it has scanned higher proportion of objects on that particular bucket and has not found sensitive data so far. So this gives you a good view on where to prioritize the efforts for investigation further. Now let's look at a particular bucket and see what data is the Macie findings providing you. So I click on a particular bucket, and it will actually show me some of the details that Macie has identified. At the top, you will see sensitivity score. So Macie's new feature is designed to create a baseline profile of all these S3 buckets based on how much sensitive data has been found, type of sensitive data, and different factors. This information is represented in the form of a sensitivity score. And this sensitivity score changes as the number of sensitive data on that particular S3 bucket changes. So if there are more objects that are found to be sensitive, the score would go up. But the number 80 here represents that I have high number of sensitive data on this particular bucket. So this gives me a view of how to actually prioritize my efforts further. If you scroll down, you will see what type of sensitive data has been found on those buckets. So there are 1,583 credit cards found on that bucket. And similarly, you can find more sensitive data as you drill down. So it gives you that view. So now that you have understood that there is sensitive data, you want to understand the security posture of that bucket. You want to understand whether it's in a production environment or whether that's externally or internally shared with different customers or not. So when you look at the bucket details, you will understand that whether you are actually sharing that bucket with an external customer or an internal customer, or whether you have encryption enabled or not. And if you have encryption enabled, what type of encryption are you using? Because you want to protect your data. And lastly, you want to understand whether this public bucket is public or not, because sensitive data on a public bucket is something that you want to remediate and investigate further. So once you have identified all this information, Macie is actually layering all the security-related metadata so that you can easily identify the risk on this particular bucket. And once you have looked at these posture of this bucket, security posture of this bucket, you may want to validate some of the risk. So you go to object samples, and then you can click on any of these objects, and it will take you to that particular object. The Macie user should have access to that particular S3 object to actually see the contents of that object. So if I click on it, I need to have permissions to view that object. But if you have the right permissions to view it, you can validate the risk on that particular object, see if the data that has been detected is really sensitive to your use case or not. So this gives a good view. Once you have validated the risk and you think that this particular bucket is highly sensitive as per your use case, you can assign a maximum score. Assigning maximum score to this bucket pins that bucket, assigns a score of 100. It helps your teams to prioritize remediation on that particular bucket. So you want to prioritize a bucket which is public, has sensitive data, or maybe in a production environment has sensitive data. Assigning a maximum score is a decision that you need to make based on your organization needs and your use cases. So once you have looked at the particular bucket, let's look at another example. So I go to another bucket, and for this bucket, I see that sensitivity score is 51, means it has found some sensitive data on this bucket. But when I look at the name of that bucket, it contains demo. So as a data security engineer, you want to make sure that the sensitive data is protected, but you want to also remove all the false positive, because you want to focus your efforts on the actual sensitive data. So the name tells me it's a demo bucket, but you may want to verify with the bucket owner. So with the bucket details, you identify the bucket owner, who owns the data, and then is that data sample data, or is it the actual customer data that you have on the bucket? After you have talked to the bucket owner and they have informed you that it's just a sample data used for experimentation purposes, what you can do is you can exclude this bucket from data discovery. What that does is it will exclude this bucket from any of the further sampling that Macie is doing for you to detect sensitive data. It helps you further prioritize your efforts on the actual sensitive data and then remove false positives. Now, once you have done that, now let's look at some of the advanced features that this feature actually provides. So when I go to automated discovery settings page, it allows you, it gives you an option to exclude any of the other buckets. So one of the ways you can exclude the bucket is after investigation, you can choose to exclude from automated discovery. The next way is if you already know that there are certain buckets, you don't want to discover sensitive data. For example, there could be a bucket which is just created for experimentation purposes, and you already know that. You can choose to exclude them so that you're not scanning for automated sensitive data on those buckets. It also allows you to remove some managed data identifier. As Himanshu was mentioning, that there are managed data identifiers which are basically some techniques to discover sensitive data that Macie uses to discover sensitive data. There are over 100 managed data identifiers that AWS recommends. So automated discovery includes those managed data identifiers by default when looking for sensitive data. But you may choose to exclude them. Some of the examples of managed data identifier could be addresses or AWS credentials, or it could be bank account number. And if you choose that a particular managed identifier is something that you want to exclude from discovery, in this case, I have selected address. From the next scan that Macie is doing, it will exclude them, and then the false positive will be reduced as per your use case. It also allows you an option to create your own custom data identifiers. For example, you may want to create employee IDs. Every organization have their own way of creating employee IDs. There is a naming convention that you use. So you can create a regular expression that detects that particular employee ID, and then you can actually add it to the automated discovery. So when Macie is looking for sensitive data, it will look for employee IDs in S3 buckets once that custom data identifier is added. Now we have looked at some examples of what Macie is doing. Now let's look at some of the findings that Macie provides. You can also drill down into some of these findings. So we looked at from a bucket perspective, but as a data security engineer, you may want to further drill down on all these findings. For example, if I click on a particular finding, it gives me information about which is the object that finding has been found. If you further scroll down, there is an option called reveal samples. And when I click on review, it takes me to another page, which helps me to validate the risk on that particular finding. What I can do is I can click on reveal samples, and it will actually show me the sensitive data that has been discovered on that particular object. How it will help you is you can validate whether those credit card numbers are valid credit card numbers, or is it just some sample data? Do you care about them? Do you consider them as a risk to your data security posture or not? So as you can see, it actually revealed some of the credit card number. For the purposes of demo, I'm using some examples of credit card number. They are not actual credit card numbers. But as you can see, that it will reveal some information. So once you have actually looked at the samples, now you may want to build some automation on top of it. So all this information that you have seen, all the findings so far, is sent to EventBridge, Amazon EventBridge, and you can create your own automation workflows. For example, you may want to build an automation workflow to disable public access on a bucket if it contains sensitive data. Or you may want to actually notify a team if there is a sensitive data found on a bucket. So you can actually go to Amazon EventBridge and create a rule, look for a Macie finding, and then send it to a Slack. Similarly, you can build your own automation workflows, your own compliance workflows. You can use this information to build some dashboards as well that could provide you much more visibility. And now I will invite Carlos to come on stage and actually talk about a real-world example and share some experience.
Thank you. So I will be talking about our customer story here at Opportune. Opportune is a driven by a mission to provide inclusive, affordable financial services that empower our customers to build a better future. We are a fintech based out of San Carlos, California, and we offer our customers, we offer them affordable options for credit to people that usually are left out of the financial mainstream. So that is our primary goal at Opportune. So Opportune's data security team, these are two of my technical leaders on the team, but we have a much larger team, and these are the folks that have been working with the AWS team, with Anuj and team to work on Macie and automated sensitive data discovery this year. So what's our story? What did we want to answer, right? Two takeaways that I want you to take away today from my story is we were looking to find out where is our sensitive data in our S3 environment, where was it? And how did we reduce that risk when we found it? How did we improve our data security posture, right? So we are a fintech, we're highly regulated. FTC safeguards is an example of that, where we have data privacy and compliance requirements from also CCPA and others. Also, in terms of remediation for us was a key factor, right? Once we knew we had findings out there, we needed to remediate those findings. So in terms of the operational excellence, we wanted to maintain and reduce overhead of maintaining and finding all this data that's out there. Like many of you have hundreds or thousands of S3 buckets. It's just not, you needed a scalable solution to go and scan for all this sensitive data, right? So we have members, we have customers at our organization. We knew we had this data lying around. We needed to go find it and remediate it. So that's what Macie and automated sensitive discovery has given us. Also, cost effectiveness was important for us because all this data takes a lot of time, and the accuracy, as Anuj mentioned, is important to have, right? You want the findings that you have before you go talk to your data owners. You want to make sure that those are true positives and that you're remediating the correct things. So the last point I'll talk about here on the metrics is time to discover data. All this data that's out there takes a lot of time, and we need scalable solutions like this that really sped it up for us to identify our riskiest S3 buckets and also start creating an inventory of where our sensitive data is. So what were some of the design considerations? So for us, we wanted cost effectiveness as well with all the data that's out there. Reduced operational overhead. And what that means for us is that we had findings. We needed the accuracy of those findings so that we didn't have to do the additional due diligence and make sure, as Anuj mentioned, that what it found was credit cards or social security numbers were valid before we talked to our data owners. So those were two very important points. Easy integration with AWS services was also a key factor for us, right? Easy plug and play with an AWS account. It shows all the S3 buckets in that account, and then we could actually go and discover the sensitive data where we're at. One of the main things that changed between when we started using the automated sensitive data discovery was the fact that before that we were scanning with Macie S3 buckets, but we just didn't know where to look first. With this new service, it's given us a prioritized list of where to go focus our efforts in remediating those, right? Because now it's given us the list of, based on that heat map that you looked at earlier, we can go and focus on those particular buckets, and then we need to do a deeper scan. We use Macie to do a full scan. Then we identify the remediation with the owners to go and find out what needs to be fixed. Do we need to protect, delete that data, archive it? So the last thing on this slide here is visualization of the data, right? We can't give results. The final results have to be to the data owners. They not only need the S3 bucket itself, but we need to guide them to where the location of the paths are. Where are the files? Where's the data with the sensitive information? So that then we can have a plan for remediation, right? They're the data owners, they're the data producers, and you work with those teams to definitely remediate what the findings of these services do for us. So in terms of visualization, Anuj mentioned it. We have dashboards out of the Athena results. You tell a story to your users where the actual findings are and then how to remediate those. This is a high-level solution design that worked for us. And the beauty of it is that it was really, again, it was AWS. It was seamless integration. We connected our accounts. We used everything that you see on this here. And the cadence, from our security engineers connecting to the S3 buckets, scanning, doing finding the results, getting those results, querying those results from Athena, right? And then ultimately putting them into QuickSight, a dashboard that's native to AWS that we also built ourselves over and above what automated sensitive discovery does for us. On the right-hand side of that screen, you have obviously the multiple accounts, as many of us have. You plug them in. It gives you the inventory of S3 buckets because you can't scan what you don't know about. You have to have an inventory of that. So for us, the business outcomes were really reducing data, right? A better, improved data security posture management for us. What we found with automated sensitive data discovery is for some of the most important attributes for us, what we call crown jewel data. We've talked about them, SSNs and others. The 95% higher accuracy ratio on that, meaning those were true findings that we actually could go back to our data owners, identify and do a remediation plan with them to remove that data, encrypt it, protect it somehow, right? 80% reduction in time to discover. In some cases, there's been instances with where it took days sometimes for some of the larger buckets, huge buckets, terabytes of data, where it took days, where in most cases, these services did it in hours. We actually timed one of our not a large bucket, a 1 terabyte size bucket, and Macie scanned that in under 30 minutes for us. So I'm sure it'll vary, based on the data that's in that bucket, but that was a pretty good metric for us to identify. Again, improved data security posture. We're in the business of reducing risk. And so these services help us do that by first finding the risks, knowing who the owners are, and then remediating those risks. The last item on that is prioritize that risk remediation. Before automated sensitive data discovery came along, we were using Macie. We were running jobs to scan these buckets. We really didn't know. We knew which buckets to scan, but we really didn't know until this solution came around which ones to really prioritize, because it was doing it continuously for us. So it gave us the buckets to go to focus on our efforts to remediate, and as a result, we're putting the efforts where they need to be for the highest risk buckets to identify, remediate with our data owners, and put the focus where it needs to be, right? So for us, what's next? We'd like to talk to AWS about how do we build in additional remediation strategies in the services so that we can work with the findings, we produce the results, we work with the teams. I think Anuj alluded to that a little bit. But really, how do we get that remediation, that end-to-end workflow to ultimately reduce the risk? Because that's all we're doing here. If you find something, you want to ultimately reduce that risk by deleting the data, encrypting it, or whatever solution is the remediation plan, right? Risk score profiles. Just because you remediate, you find data today and you remediate today, doesn't mean that you're going to be clean tomorrow, right? Our data flows into S3 buckets continuously. There's new data production from teams, from our data science folks, from our engineering teams, from our applications. So it has to be a continuous process. So just because you find it and remediate it today doesn't mean it's going to be clean next month or in 2 months. So it's a constant scanning and profiling for your riskiest buckets. So in my mind, it's a watch item, right? Hey, we have to watch. These are your top items. These are the ones that you have to watch for. Increased scanning capabilities. What that means really is for other data asset types, right? So we have databases, we have S3 buckets, we have many types of data sources, and there's data all over the place. So how can we get these services to additional services, data sources to do a very similar process? You connect, you scan, you find, you remediate, right? And again, on the executive summary dashboard, that's really just rolling up additional dashboards for visualizations to tell a better story ultimately to your customers, your data producers, so that the remediation can take place, right? And with that, I believe I will pass it on to Himanshu. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Carlos. Hopefully that was helpful, and it ties in together in how Macie's features have actually helped Opportune, in the journey of the data discovery as well as data governance. As Carlos highlighted, the journey in 2020 started with, or last year, 2021 started with, using the sensitive data discovery jobs. But again, we wanted to raise the bar for the user experience there by making it simple and easy with this automated discovery feature. So key takeaways, first and foremost, if you are already using Macie, you'll have to go in and opt into this feature. So I recommend customers who are already leveraging Macie and has already activated that, you'll have to enable this feature. The feature comes with a 30-day free trial. And on new accounts, this will be automatically enabled. One of the other things that we've done here is that we've actually raised the bar in cost optimization as well. So this new feature is now available at a fraction of the cost compared to actually doing full scans of buckets. So not only does it help customers to easily make a decision on where do they want to start for sensitive data, but it also eliminates the cost estimates and or the prohibition of actually going in and making a decision on whether to scan petabytes of data or not, which can get expensive. So this new feature is very highly optimized and has a standalone pricing as well. The other thing is that most organizations need to make a decision, like I mentioned earlier, as to what is sensitive for your organization. So before you actually enable the feature and or as you go through the journey, make sure that you're revising and or updating the scope of what is considered sensitive by using both the managed data identifiers, which don't have any cost associated with them. You can enable all of them and have Macie detect all the findings and then take an action on them. Or if you want your security teams to not be, have all the findings for simple data types like name, addresses, etc., you can exclude them as well. So there's no cost associated with the managed data identifiers at all. Also, you can define your custom identifiers as well. So that's an important aspect from a best practices to ensure that you can define what is considered sensitive to your organization before the service is doing its job. And then finally, taking action on that continuous visibility that the service is providing. Obviously, as part of the detection feature, it'll detect the sensitive data and provide you visibility into where that high-risk posture is. But the follow-up action is to actually go and take remediation or response on those findings. So that's an important aspect. As I mentioned, all the findings can automatically be sent to Security Hub, which is one place to then also organize those findings and aggregate them with other control evaluations that you might be using. For example, Security Hub already has some standard evaluations that it can tell you what is the posture of your AWS infrastructure and the controls behind them. And then you can combine those together and then take actions. Or more mature customers, what they would do is that they would actually leverage findings from, for example, Guard Duty, which is actually a threat detection service. And Guard Duty for S3 protection is highlighting whether there is an abnormal or a malicious access on your data. And then you can then correlate that with the Macie finding, which is telling you that there's a sensitive information or there's sensitive data in that bucket as well. So combining those two in Security Hub and having one place to view all of that, then you can take a collective action from Security Hub as well. So those are some of the best practices and takeaways that I wanted to leave you guys with. In addition to this session, there are other sessions that are focusing on sensitive data as well as protection of sensitive data and data governance. So these are some of the other sessions that are focusing. The first one is focused on building apps and to isolate and process sensitive data with AWS Nitro enclaves, and the other two are focused on S3 security settings and controls, as well as confidential computing. So make sure to add those to your agenda if you're interested. And to get started, here's a blog post that is also available. This is the launch blog for automated sensitive data discovery. You can please take a note of this. And with that, I appreciate you guys coming in. Please feel free to take the survey in your mobile app. And happy to take any questions since we have some time here in this room as well.